Did Colorado's offensive line actually improve, or was it just North Dakota State? I'm going to tell you why. They actually improved.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy, it fixes tired fast. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. So go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And college football is finally here, and so is Dalton Wasserman from PFF. Dalton, how you doing?
Fantastic, man. What a day we had yesterday, right? I don't know if you were, but we were, I think, 14 or 15 hours, whatever it was, straight of just football, man. It's so good to have the Saturdays back and start next weekend. We'll have the Sundays back too, right? But no, it was a blast of a 3 days. We saw so many good games, unexpected games, big games, everything you could ask for in a college football weekend.
Yeah, speaking of the pros, I had to pull a pro move yesterday, Dalton. I was looking at wedding venues. So I'm looking at venues. I'm like, yeah, the dance floor area looks great. Also, Clemson, Georgia on the phone in the pocket, right? Like, that's how you got to pull it off sometimes. And that's what I was doing. But luckily, Colorado played on Thursday, and they played against North Dakota State in a game that I called it. I think everyone that came on my show called it. It was uncomfortably close, right? And we all knew that was going to happen. North Dakota State's no team to slouch at. So I wanted to go over some of your guys' rankings over at PFF. But before we do, can you provide like a general just like explanation of like why some things are wackier than they seem, or like why, just the overall view of it?
So I think what people have to remember, and as we watch highlights and lowlights and whatever they show you on SportsCenter and whatever you see on Twitter, is we grade every single play, right? It's not just, these 5 or 6 highlight plays are the ones you remember. Yeah, those are memorable. Those get graded either really positive or really negative. But there's also a factor of every single play gets graded. Some of them neutral, some positive, some negative. So when you see these numbers come out, sometimes you can remember, that one big flashy play or that one terrible play in your mind that sticks out. But that's not the only thing that influences the grading, right? And what the grading is supposed to be is a measurement and a reflection of the entire game, not just a couple of plays or the highlights, the 3 or 4 plays they might show you. So look, there are times when there's things to nitpick and you go, okay, a certain guy may have been that bad on a half dozen plays or that good on a half dozen plays where it's like, okay, it's kind of tilting it upward or downward. But you just have to remember it's every game. We have hundreds of people that go through in these grades and these games over the course of, they work from noon to 6 a.m. on a Saturday night, man. It's crazy. But it's every play, offense, defense, special teams. And you just have to remember, it's a compilation of that and not just maybe those 4 or 5 plays that stick out.
Got it. Okay. So it's not just like, hey, Travis Hunter had a great catch, but why is his defense grade so low, or like whatever it is? It's like Travis Hunter was targeted X amount of times, gave up X amount of catches, or whatever it may be. So appreciate you going over that. Let's talk about the grades that stood out to me the most. And I think it was kind of the one that everyone was intrigued by, the offensive line grades. For everyone who didn't know, the 5 starters from highest to lowest registered at 80.8. Khalil Benson and Justin Mayers both had that. Tyler Brown got a 77.2. Jordan Seaton, the true freshman 5-star, 63.7. And then Hank Zelinkas, the center, had the lowest, rounding out the bunch at 48.7. First of all, talk to me about the improvement you see and why we shouldn't read too much into these, like the lower grades, I guess you could call them, for the last couple guys.
I think, first of all, you can't overreact too much to one game, right? And obviously, look, one game against what's a really good defensive front, obviously an FCS team, but a defensive front with several good players. And then they run a lot of weird stunts and stuff and schemes like that, right? So you mentioned, say, like Zelinskis, right? Like, he had 41 pass blocking reps and he gave up 3 pressures. It's just that, those 3 pressures were really bad. And 2 of them are ones where he missed stunts. So you're talking about, he's still a young player, right? I believe a sophomore or redshirt sophomore. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a guy who's still figuring things out. Like, those mental mistakes are things you can coach out of it. Sometimes there was 1 rep. Yeah, he just got beat by a nose guard. It's going to happen. Right? It's going to happen. He's not going to be perfect. He's a young kid. It's an offensive line that's gelling together. But overall, I thought their offensive line, especially in pass protection, I saw a good amount of what I wanted to see. As a team, a 66.6 pass blocking grade. Is it the best thing ever? No. Is it terrible? No. I think you're playing a tough front that's coached really well. if they can pass block like that most of the time, and I believe Shedeur was pressured on maybe 30% of his dropbacks, which isn't a terrible number at all. If you're getting 30 or less, or 31 or so or less, you're having a pretty good night, because the best teams hover between 20 and 25. And last year, I believe Shedeur was pressured on 39% of his dropbacks, which is getting kind of high. So I thought it was a reasonably good night. There's a lot of things to get better in, but I thought they actually have more to work on in the run game than the passing game.
Yeah, I thought, first of all, the only sack too was Shedeur's fault. He ran right into it, trying to make a play. It happens, but great improvement from the line. I wanted to dive into the running backs or the running game situation. In your opinion, and based on the data, was it more so the run blocking, they weren't getting a big enough push, or the running backs just didn't have the best day, I guess you could call it?
It's a bit of both. Honestly, I think they're trying to find who's going to be the horse, right? Is it Offerdahl? Is it Hayden? Is it somebody else? So the run blocking wasn't great. The rushing wasn't great. And it really wasn't great last year. Last year with Hankerson and Edwards, they had one of the lowest rushing grades in the country. So they're trying to find those guys at running back. I think the thing for me, look, we just have to accept that Colorado probably isn't going to have a ton of balance, right? It would be nice to get 100 to 120 rushing yards a game. I think what they're going to have to do is just find it with no matter who's out there, right? When you talk about controlling safeties and creating lighter boxes to create one-on-ones, they're just not a team that's going to line tight ends and extra guys up at the line of scrimmage and run you over. They're not, okay? They're a finesse team. We have to accept that. Now, can they be last in the country in rushing like they were last year? No, you'd prefer that not to happen. If that happens, you're putting a lot of pressure on Shedeur, but they just need to be able to run the ball like when they really need to. Like, do we believe on a 3rd and 2 that maybe they could run the ball and they have that two-way go instead of making Shedeur throw it every time? Not that he couldn't handle it, but you're asking a lot of him. So, look, they're not going to be an elite running team. This is where we're at now. We've seen, 12, 13, 14 games of evidence of this, right? And hopefully this line gets a little bit better. Look, and these guys you mentioned, Benson's a good player. Justin Mayers is a guy I really like that was coming up from UTEP. Seton had a nice debut. So I think they're going to have to scheme it up a little more, and they're just going to have to figure out through formations, and Pat Shurmur's going to have to figure out when there's lighter boxes, and some of it's going to be about timing. When do we run the ball, and when do we just keep this thing balanced enough?
Yeah, the run game's a weird situation. You mentioned Hankerson. I thought it was not hilarious, but it's just ironic. He goes to Oregon State. They play Idaho State yesterday. Runs for 155 yards, 2 touchdowns. As soon as he leaves Boulder, he's just popping off. And it's everything goes into it. It's the line, it's the play calling, it's the situational stuff. Realistically, to go on a quick tangent on how I think they could fix the run game, I think they bailed on it way too early. They did it a lot last year. They would try it a few times early, it wouldn't work, and then they'd be like, okay, we're done running the ball. And it's like, why? Throw in a run every once in a while. And then there was a 4th and 1 where they got stuffed. They took a shotgun snap. I need the quarterback under center there, and if you don't want Shedeur to get hurt, you brought in Walter Taylor, you brought in Destin Wade, 2 guys, they're both big, they're both mobile. Be like, hey, you want to roll with this team? You're now the Wildcat quarterback, and you now get to do quarterback power. So congrats. I think that's a few ways to maximize the run game. Realistically, let's go to the defensive side of the ball now. I thought the secondary would be a strength. You talked about specifically, I think it was on Friday, you had a tweet specifically that pointed out their weakness, and I hope you remember it without me I'm vaguely describing it to you, so I hopefully you remember what your critique was. But what was your biggest issue with this defense?
Yeah, I don't think there was anything about what happened defensively, really. That was the players. That's on the players. I think they came out with a plan, and it's North Dakota State, and I understand they have the better athletes. They came out with a plan, and they said, we're going to run press man coverage the vast majority of
you do remember.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been brewing. It's had my blood boiling since Thursday. Trust me. And look, I understand it. Look, you have Travis Hunter, you have Preston Hodge, you have Shiloh on the back end, it's a good safety, you have all these things, but it's very dangerous. They ran cover 1, okay, like man across the board and 1 deep safety on almost 70% of their plays, okay? For reference, there was only 2 teams in the country last season that ran it over 50%. That was Illinois and Purdue, and that was Big Ten West where, well, you can do that, right? Teams like Colorado playing in the Big 12, you can't do that. And look, any respectable offensive coordinator if a team in front of them, even if they have a Travis Hunter and all the corners that they have, and DJ McKinney and all these talented corners, because they do, they're extremely talented guys. But if you run man coverage every single play, there's a part of every offensive coordinator's playbook that's just man beaters. And we saw that. We saw that schematically. We saw pick plays like the touchdown pass to the tight end, I think it was, for North Dakota State. We saw empty it out and quarterback draw because nobody was left but Shiloh to tackle Cam Miller. That's not what you want. You don't want your free safety ISO'd up on a quarterback like that. We saw shallow concepts, the same things that bothered Colorado last year. We saw so many things that North Dakota State hit a point where they're like, well, they're just in man every play. So we're going to run the man beaters. We're going to get away from whatever we came in here with. We're going to run this package of plays, and it's going to work. And you have a guy like Cam Miller, even when it's not specifically that play, when you're in man coverage, okay, somebody better have eyes on the quarterback because everybody else's back is turned. You're one-on-one, right? We see this all the time in the NFL. If you run man coverage against Josh Allen, he's just going to take off on you, right? It's that thing. And Cam Miller is really mobile. So I'm curious to see if it's a 1 week thing because they were playing North Dakota State and Colorado clearly on both sides had the better athletes, or if that's actually how they're going to run their defense. I would be a little concerned because it's not at all because Travis and Preston and those guys on the outside, they're wicked talented. The other one too, was it the second play of the game where the angle route from the backfield beat Trevor Woods? Yep. Trevor Woods is a good player. He's a good player. He's a good athlete. He's a former safety, but he's not Fred Warner. You can't ask him to do that all the time. So I want to see going into this next week, is the coverage going to stay like that? And we're going to run press man every single play because we have the corners, or are we going to mix it up and make this thing a little more diverse?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because honestly, once you pointed that out, I went back and I was watching and I was like, yeah, every play, and it reminded me a lot of the Colorado State game. And I think that's how Colorado State last year torched them. It was just like crossing routes over the middle. You're just gonna have to pick who you cover, and they left the quarterback wide open. And luckily for North Dakota State, Cam Miller is a freak athlete. As for quarterbacks as they go, I think it was a 20-yard run to sort of bring the game within a score at the end there. Good coverage, but they had no eyes on the quarterback, and so he scampered off, and it was a 20-yard touchdown. So yeah, very big question there. I wonder if that's a Robert Livingston sort of learning moment from never coordinating a defense, or if that's just a sort of stubbornness where it's this is what we do. We have 3 really good corners and we're going to do that. Very interesting method because the Big 12 does have a lot of mobile quarterbacks, and they have KJ Jefferson coming up. They have DeQuan Finn coming up. Dylan Raiola is going to try to beat them with his arm next week, and he has Isaiah Neyor. And we're going to talk about Nebraska real quick, but first, a break. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at 5 Hour Energy Drink. Who doesn't need a daily pick-me-up? And I know we all get tired after lunch. I do it myself. You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit a wall after lunch, and we just want to go to sleep. So let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, and that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code, LOCKEDONCFB, all capitalized, to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Hey, you may also need it to watch that Big 12 ACC After Dark because it was getting late out there. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. College football is back. Dalton Wasserman's here. We're talking about all things Colorado, and the next thing on the menu is Nebraska. And I don't think we were going to learn a lot from Nebraska's first game against UTEP, right? UTEP's one of the, for lack of better terms, one of the worst teams in college football, unfortunately, this year. They won 40-7. A nice little welcome to college football game for Dylan Raiola. 19 of 27, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really took a liking to Texas transfer Isaiah Neyor, who kind of fell out of the rotation in Austin. I think he was credited with 1 catch in his 1 year or 2 years in Texas. Missed his first year due to injuries. So let's talk about Nebraska. What did you like? Where do you think Colorado could exploit them?
I think you exploit them in the same way that they did last year, right? And Nebraska was really puzzled with how to handle Shedeur. Right. It was either early in the game, they tried to just drop a 3-man rush and he just gave him all the time in the world, right? Then sometimes they try to just go all out and zero blitz, and they made him make quick decisions. And that's the hardest part about defending Shedeur, as long as he's reasonably protected, is I think him and Carson Beck from Georgia see the field better than any other quarterbacks in the country. Even this week against North Dakota State, they tried everything. They tried too high. They tried one high. They tried man. They tried to rotate. They tried blitz. Nothing worked. He just sees the field like an NFL quarterback, right? So there's even times when you think maybe I can fool him. The one thing you can't do is fool Shedeur. If you're going to beat him, you have to get a pass rush, and Nebraska got no pass rush last year, just about. And even the couple plays they did, just like in the North Dakota State game, he made plays on the move, right? I think Nebraska's best way of beating them is they can't give up so many big plays, get the pass rush going. And last year you could just see they were so hamstrung by their quarterback situation. Just Jeff Sims and those guys. Nebraska, for us, had the third worst passing grade in all of college football last year. They're not going to have that with Raiola, right? It's going to be more balanced. Because I think the game, they held Colorado scoreless for at least 25 minutes, I think it was. Like early in that game, it was 0-0 for a long time. And then Colorado, they got one touchdown towards the end of the half, and then the avalanche came. But I think that's the biggest thing is Nebraska getting a pass rush and having some sort of balance on offense is the way that they have to attack Colorado, especially the pass rush. If they don't get any pressure on Shedeur, he's going to kill him. He's just going to kill him again. I mean, it's what he does, and he's got this stable of weapons Colorado has. You can't give these guys 3.5, 4, 5 seconds to work with.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Horn probably had, in college football history, the quietest 198 yards I've ever seen, like ever. Like I was checking, I was on stat broadcast after the game, and I was just like, 198. I was like, I knew he was making plays, but it was like he was a couple away from 200, and it's like we didn't even hear about it. It was just that ridiculous. To kind of harp on how bad Nebraska was in passing last year, they were led in receiving. Their leading receiver, Billy Kemp, he had 310 yards receiving on the year. Isaiah Neyor he's a third of the way there after one game. Their leading passer had 967 yards. So Dylan Raiola also pretty much a third of the way there, if you will. So very big difference in Lincoln, Nebraska this year. So we talked about the pressure, or Nebraska getting pressure on Shedeur. That's the key for Nebraska to win. For Colorado, because the odds makers they're leaning Nebraska. So clearly they get a little bit of home cooking in their favor. They have the home field advantage. But is there like a matchup that you like in favor of Colorado? Like, is there, whether it's receivers on corners? I know Nebraska has some pretty stout corners. Is it defensive line? That's who we should have talked about. We're going to pivot real quick. Colorado's defensive line. They did not get any pressure on. How do they affect Dylan Raiola?
The pass rush needs some work. I need guys like BJ Green and Deion Hayes to get a little more pressure. And I don't think from what I've seen, Raiola is quite as mobile as, say, a Cam Miller. But they do need a better pass rush. And I'm curious, look, if you're going to go with man coverage, well, go ahead and blitz. Because there was a lot of times where they would run that cover one and they wouldn't even blitz. So I go, we're not sending extra and rushing people. We're just asking our corners to do it all. So I think definitely their D-line, I thought, played really well in the run game, especially transfer from Houston. Chidozie and Nwankwo, that's a worker right there on the inside. I love watching him. I watched some of his Houston tape before the year. That's just a worker, one of those lunch pail guys they talk about, right? He's a grinder. Ryan Buell's another guy I think can really help them. I thought their defensive line played pretty well the other night, especially against a run-heavy team. They do need more pass rush, absolutely. And I think BJ Green is that guy who can turn up the heat on Raiola. Because when you watch Raiola against UTEP, and predictably so, he had all day to throw it. He had all day to throw the football. A couple of times he was under pressure. The one deep ball to the right that he got hit that he completed anyway, cool. But he was really, I think the one thing I'm most impressed with Raiola is his poise and just his apparently it's just not too big a stage for him, clearly, even for a true freshman. It's just he's NFL dad, uncle's the offensive line coach. You can see the pedigree. He's so calm and cool back there. He is. Now, he can be calm and cool if he's got 6 yards of space in the pocket to work with. So I look at the two big pass rushers they brought in. I've talked before about all of the run defenders that Colorado brought in their front seven. The two big pass rushers, BJ Green and Deion Hayes, I think they have to have bigger nights than they did the other night.
Yeah, I totally forgot to bring that up in the first segment, so I'm glad we kind of tied it in here because Dylan Raiola, I mean, he tore up UTEP. Now, obviously, he should have, but he's a true freshman. First game, there's jitters. We've seen, I mean, Connor Weigman, obviously, very different scenario, but he struggled yesterday, right? not a true freshman either, but he's still a young quarterback. And so you never know how young quarterbacks are going to react to their first game. And so I feel like he kind of passed the smell test, if you will. So Colorado, we need to see those pass rush grades go up, which means they're getting pressure on Dylan Raiola. The run defense was really good. Realistically, I think Colorado, oh gosh, I don't want to guess or like pretend I remember their ranking, but let's just say they were near the bottom of college football last year. I would say there was 133 teams. They were probably 130, 129 because they were atrocious against the run. So last night, Thursday night, really strong performance. Do you think Nebraska is going to try to use the run to help out Dylan Raiola? And if so, how does Colorado sort of combat that?
Absolutely. And your number that we have, run defense grade last year for Colorado, 122nd, which is the I think fourth worst I have in the Power 5 last year in run defense grade. So
I was close. 7 spots off.
and it's actually one of the things I liked watching Nebraska's tape last night was their willingness, even in a game like UTEP, where could you have let Raiola go and throw for 404 touchdowns or try to do it? Sure. But they balanced it. They balanced it intentionally. They were committed to the run. They wanted to use the entire playbook because some teams against a UTEP, a game you're going to win 40-7. Some teams will hide some of the playbook. They didn't. They got out there. They ran the football. They RPO. They play action. They balanced it. They took shots. They ran their whole playbook because they need him to get reps. And they're absolutely going to balance this thing. At the end of the day, Nebraska's got huge guys on both sides of the ball, but their offensive line, they're massive. They are massive dudes, and Colorado's defensive line better be ready to play because Nebraska ran the ball reasonably well against them last year, right? They just had no quarterback to make it two-dimensional. Now they have a quarterback, but they still, with a true freshman quarterback in the biggest game of his life already, in the second game of his college career, they're going to want to balance it and take some of it out of his hands. If this game, I think what Colorado would love is for this game to become Shedeur versus Raiola. I would take that gamble. I have Shedeur Sanders, right? Yeah. I think I have the best quarterback in the country. He's one of the two or three best quarterbacks in the country, right? They want to make that the shootout. They want to make it the aerial thing. They want to make it about the quarterbacks, right? Nebraska doesn't want to do that. So it is Colorado's defensive line and run defense as well is a big story in this game because if they can stop the run and you make Nebraska one-dimensional, maybe Raiola's just that special. And he'll beat you, and he'll tear you up, and we're about to talk about him for the next 3 or 4 years or into the NFL or whatever. But on this night, you make him beat you. I still believe that. I know he's good against UTEP. That's UTEP. They're supposed to beat UTEP. They would have beat UTEP with Jeff Sims, right? Yeah. You make Raiola beat you. You make it a game about the quarterbacks. Defensive line, yeah, they have to get a pass rush too. But I was really encouraged by what I saw in run defense the other night, and I think it comes up huge. It's a massive factor if Colorado's going to win this week.
Okay, we see where he's encouraged. We're going to hear about where Dalton is discouraged by Colorado when we come back. This episode of Locked on Bus is brought to you by Ultimate Head Coach. Hey, Locked on Bus fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step in the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes? You get to recruit players, hire your coaching staff, and oversee training camps, and handle all the school scholarship situations. You can go transfer portal, whatever it may be. You control every crucial detail of the program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, you have to do it all. And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the game. So if there's mistakes, it's on you. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Bus fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a boost to start your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the App Store. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. Okay, we just talked about what we were sort of high on. We talked about Nebraska. Let's talk about where Colorado needs to get better, right? I think that North Dakota State game was a good win. I don't think people were ever going to give them credit for winning against them. It's just how it goes until we see Oregon struggle against Idaho. And then it's like, oh, maybe we should respect the FCS a little more, right? Coach Prime himself said after the game, it felt like they lost. And so I kind of like that mentality because it's like they're not satisfied. There was a couple things that I saw, and I want to get your comments on. One, I think schematically on offense, they got a little weird in the first half. They kind of let North Dakota State build their lead, and I don't feel like I don't know if they weren't getting aggressive enough or if they were just getting a little timid or sort of scared of making mistakes. I noticed that defensively, obviously the man coverage thing is a huge issue. And then late in games, what was up with that play calling? I know Shedeur took the blame for the check, or where he checked to the pass, but what's up with that? Is that going to be a problem? So let's go through each of those.
So the first one, yeah, I think there's always in week one, especially in a new opponent and you're charged up, and I think there's always a feeling out process. I think this concerns me the least. I thought for the most part, Pat Shurmur called a pretty good game. The quick game and Shedeur and the screens in the quick game, it's going to be an extension. You know, coaches always talk about that thing, the extension of the run game, right? So even those plays where they get 6 yards on a curl and they just move on to 2nd and 4, like that, you could kind of think of that in a way. Colorado is one of those teams, that's kind of their run game. Is the quick game. And Shedeur executes it really well because of how fast he processes things. That concerns me the least. The end of the game thing, look, I think there's a theme here going into this week. I've said since Thursday, I think Colorado has the talent. I think they have the players to win 9 or 10 games. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They might have the best football player in the country. They got a stable of receivers. They've got an improved defensive line. You've got a secondary. You can do a lot of things with the best football player in the country, right? This game and moving forward, their success this season. Last year, the roster, they started to piece it together, but that was the worst team in football in 2022. Okay, Colorado was, and what they inherited. This year's about coach priming these coaches because situational stuff, you can't have that. Other teams will beat you. You do that against Arizona or whoever else, or Utah or whoever else in the Big 12. They're gonna make you pay for that. When the game is over, let it be over. Miami learned that last year against Georgia Tech, right?
In a very hard way.
And the defensive play calling is a thing to me. I'm not as worried about the offensive play calling. I think the run game stuff a little, but that's more about execution. And I think Pat Shurmur's just got to help them out a little. Just create light boxes. Find ways to create 5-on-5 because they have so many threats outside. They should be able to just create space, okay? The defensive play calling is the big one for me. Again, the press man, maybe it's a 1-week game plan thing. If they come out different and diverse, I'm going to be really encouraged against Nebraska. If they come out the first 5 plays against Nebraska, then I just see press cover 1 every play. I'm going to be a little worried because I'm like, this is not how this works. I'm like, some teams can do that. Penn State can do that, but Penn State also has a top flight pass rush. Colorado doesn't have that, right? So teams are allowed to hold the ball. Defensive play calling, situational football. Those are the 2 things. I really don't believe that the North Dakota State game was that close because of the players. I don't have a whole lot of issue with the way the players played on Thursday. That game should have been a lot wider spread than it ended up, especially with the way they were rolling on offense. And I know they didn't run the ball a lot. They could have whatever they want in the passing game against that team. It was so clear. Hunter, Shepard, Wester, I'm missing Jimmy Horn, of course. I have so many receivers, I forget them all now. But
it's hard to remember them all.
The success of this Colorado team for me comes down to coaching. It's not the players. They have the players. I've thought this since Thursday. I'm like, they should have won this game by so much more. And there's just certain things in defensive play calling and situational football. If they would have lost that game, I don't even know the meltdown that would have happened after that with the throw. And I know Shedeur took the blame for it. But at a certain point, he's Deion Sanders, but he's still a young kid. Somebody's got to be in his ear, hey, there's no check on this play. We're not doing the check. We're just hand the ball off, right? Like these are things you could say on the side, especially with the helmets, with the earpieces now, right? These are things that can be said up until 15 seconds. Hey, no, don't throw it. There's no reason to throw it. Just don't do it. It's not, this is where we are with the clock. So things like that, coaching to me now, from what I've seen, will be the biggest variable in Colorado's success.
Yeah, I think the coaching aspect has been something that it's like I noticed it in small doses. I noticed it last year against Oregon State. They had a weird situation where they could have got out of the first half, and all of a sudden they threw the ball for no reason at their own 5. The next thing you know, Oregon State's going on a 21-point swing because they punted, scored, and all that. And then USC last year, Shedeur, he took the blame again. Check to a run, though. They're down 14, no timeouts, and they're trying to score, get the ball back quickly, and we're checking the runs. And so I think there's a lot of game management stuff that really bugs me about this team. And it's like, at some point, like you said, they have the helmet communication thing. at some point just be like, hey, you know what? We have the lead here. We can run the ball. We can take a delay of game to let the clock run. We can do whatever we want here besides throw the ball. There's no need to throw the ball. And so I think there's, like you said, I think it's on the coaching staff, right? Even though Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 10 pick, he's still a college quarterback. And as we know, college football gets wacky, it gets stupid, it gets chaotic. And so I think those are moments where they need, whether it's Pat Shurmur, who has NFL head coaching experience, whether it's one of the assistants, whether it's someone on an analyst, whoever it is, they need someone to literally just be like, have a little game, like a game management little notepad, and be like, okay, this is a scenario. These are the outcomes that we should do. Like, they need an analytics guy, I would say. Would you agree with that?
And some of those things aren't even analytics. Like when
Right.
you think about just whether it's a lot of times it's the head coach, right? It should be Coach Prime, or there's somebody designated, not even like a hardcore analytics guy on the sideline, right? Like think about that exact situation. North Dakota State has one timeout. I think there's about 1:45 to go, somewhere in there. You have a chance, basically, if not to milk it all the way down to like 5 seconds or something impossible. Like these are things coaches do at any level of football. Not even without a PhD analytics guys in there, or the people that we have in there. Sometimes it's just like, okay, how many 40-second chunks and how many timeouts, and it's been fascinating to watch all across college football. College coaches handle the 2-minute warning because I think a lot of them are so used to not having it that now it's a whole different thing. But either way, no, that's a thing. It's on your head coach, or it's on your head coach to designate somebody to be like, hey, coach, they have one timeout. And, because look, head coaches worry about a lot of things, the morale of the team, the scheme, the coaches, communication, every last little thing that, sometimes they forget to look up at the scoreboard and be like, okay, this much time is left. And, and it's very quick because you only have 40 seconds between plays. So I don't even think so much that it's just, okay, let's get an analytics guy in here. If they want to, if that's the guy, cool. Notre Dame did that recently, actually, with one of our guys, Anthony Tresh, and worked for him last night in certain situations too. It doesn't have to be that guy, though. It could be anybody to just go, listen, have a meeting this week and just go, hey, these are our clock management things. Bill Belichick was the master of it. When there's this much time left or whatever, he had plays in. How many times did we see at the end of a game Tom Brady chuck a ball into the stands to burn 5 seconds, right? It's little things like that. There's such a big difference between playing good football and then winning ball games, because the combination, it's where I question this Colorado team. Can they execute? Can they execute enough in those moments to win ball games, as opposed to just going out there and playing well and doing the things that Shedeur and Travis Hunter do? That's a huge difference. And those are the things that they can make or break your season. I mean, we see teams so often, situational football, either their season, they could win a championship on it, or they could have a terrible season on it. And these are the little moments like that are so big for Colorado. And look, there's an element to it. After you make a mistake like that with clock management, a little bit lucky that didn't burn them the other night.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those moments where, and I took a lot of heat for it because I said that's a moment that can't happen. Everyone's like, they won. And then it's like, okay, well, what happens if that ball gets tipped and they pick 6 or whatever? Or what happens if Colorado doesn't have one of the best punters in the country who pins them 92 yards deep and pins them 87 yards deep? If he pins them 87 yards deep, North Dakota State wins that game on a Hail Mary or ties the game on a Hail Mary, right? So there's a lot of just like, I called them preventable issues, excuse me, where it's like, this happened, but it should not have happened. And it's not a football play. It's not a call. It's just like, hey, this is just us knowing what should or should not happen. So Dalton, before you go, I want you to fill in the blank here. I'm going to give you 2 sentences. First one, Nebraska beats Colorado if
they that's tough. If they win the battle up front on both sides.
That's fair. Because, I mean, trench play is going to be a huge thing for Colorado this year. We saw North Dakota State, good test, but this is going to be a really good test over in Lincoln. Colorado wins this game if what? Blank. Excuse me.
If the pass protection is as good as it was in this game last year.
Okay. I like it. Okay. Dalton, tell the people where they could find you. Obviously, you're going to be all over the Colorado Buffaloes this year. We're going to have you on much, much more this season. So tell people what you're working on and all that, so that way they know where they can find our PFF worker.
So all of our written content obviously is on pff.com. So every Tuesday, so 2 days from now, every Tuesday at 6 p.m., Max and I will break down the 5 or maybe even sometimes 6 biggest games in college football, do a preview. This week, we certainly, the Colorado-Nebraska game is on our list. So tune in Tuesday on the PFF College Football Show on YouTube at 6 o'clock. And then every Sunday, today we went at noon, following Sundays with NFL will be a little earlier. We're going to go every Sunday at 9 a.m. We will go back over those big games and some other storylines. We'll point out standout players around the country. We'll have some later in the season. We'll have some rankings. We'll do Heisman rankings. We'll have some other segments planned that we'll do some other things. But game preview Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock and college football review Sundays at 9 a.m.
Love it. Okay. You guys know where to find him. You guys know where to find Locked On Buffs. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and we will see you guys tomorrow.